Hello, my name is Guy Crusoe, and I work for the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University. It's my pleasure to talk about another of the social role valorization themes today, what we call SRV. And what we're going to talk about today is called Positive Impressions, Imagery is Important. Now, the goal of today's presentation is really how to use positive imagery to create a positive impression on three levels. One is students with disabilities to others. Secondarily, students to themselves, and third, inclusive post-secondary education initiatives as well. Now, if you remember from a previous module that Darcy Miller-Elks did, she talked about this concept of devaluation and devalued roles. And she listed 6 of those devalued roles. And these are things that we really need to avoid and protect students with intellectual disabilities against. We don't want students with disabilities to be seen as different, as strange, as odd or dangerous. You know, that's a devalued perception of a student. We want to avoid that. The second one is lifelong child. Oftentimes students with intellectual disabilities are seen as children forever, and we want to really avoid that. Or they're seen as an object of pity or charity, and we feel sorry for them. And again, that's a devalued role, and it's a devaluation placed upon a student with an intellectual disability. Or we see them as a burden. They're just troublesome. They're not easy to work with. Or they're trivial. We sort of make fun of them, and they're not very important. And then the other thing that oftentimes happens to people with intellectual disabilities, they're seen as being dependent, seen as a lifelong client. You know, our role here today is really to try to avoid these 6 devalued roles, and we're going to talk about how to do that. Well, Wolfensberger was sort of a unique guy, and he came up with some interesting concepts that people hadn't heard about before, and he sometimes used interesting words. But one of the things he came up with was this idea of deviancy image juxtaposition. Boy, is that a mouthful to say. And I just talked about deviancy. That means being devalued and different from people. But juxtaposition is a 25-cent word. It means, you know, placing 2 things side by side to highlight the differences. And oftentimes we're not really conscious of this juxtaposition and what it means. So here we have 2 young men juxtaposed side by side. And if you look at the table in front of them, there's childish puzzles. And in the background, you see childish games on the shelves behind them. So what is the image of these young men? Is it of being capable and mature young men, or of young men more like children because of the activity they're involved in and because of the imagery of the games behind them? So you can see the power of images by just the puzzles being in front of these young men. Now let's talk about some important information about images. First, images are powerful. And we're going to look at some pictures to describe this. Here's a cover of a magazine, and it says, "The Living Death, Alzheimer's in America." The powerful word death is used juxtaposed, again, side by side, to a picture of Alzheimer's in America, as well as a picture of an elderly couple with the wife's head, eyes closed, supported on the husband's shoulder, a sense of illness, despair, or even death. Again, images are powerful. Now, this is the back of the magazine, and here's what it says. They steal, shoplift, are violent, expose themselves in public, are verbally abusive, lie, and they don't know any better. And even that print sort of fades away, as if older people are just fading away. These are all negative statements about elders. So even word juxtaposition can be powerfully negative. Here's another example around older people. And this slide shows the bottom side view of a person's head with puzzle pieces falling away from the head, with a hand holding a puzzle piece. The image says the brain game. Alzheimer's researchers grapple with clues. The word game indicates playing with the person's head, while the word grapple makes it seem like a struggle. Again, these are ways that we're depicting older citizens. Now here's a sign. I actually took this picture. The large sign is off the shoulder of a divided 2-lane road, and it says in large letters, "Eakin Rest Home, 24-hour care. You leave them and we'll love them." You know, Tyrone with a telephone number and location. The message is that older people can just be left. You no longer need to care for them, as the nursing home staff will love them. Here's a sign. In the middle there's a triangle with a red outline silhouetting 2 older people bent over, the gentleman holding a cane, the woman holding his hand. Below that, in a square sign, it says elderly people, and to cap it off, on top, there's a sign for cemetery, pointing that way, as if the older people should be walking off to the cemetery. Again, people aren't consciously doing this, but the messages are unconscious oftentimes, and again, this depicts older people as if they're better off being dead. Now we're going to talk a bit about how people with autism can be portrayed by images, and here in a blue square is a silhouette of a child with a purple circle with a white puzzle piece in the center of the head. Such a juxtaposition indicates children, with autism have a puzzle for a brain, they are a puzzle to understand. And is that the image that we want to portray for children and or adults with autism? Here's another one. What does it really feels like to be an autistic mom? This was in the Huffington Post in 2017. And the picture again shows a mother with her head hung low, with her hands holding her head, looking depressed and sad. The image that having a child with autism is devastating. Again, is this the imagery we want to get across about autism? Now let's switch to another disability, mental disorders. And again, this is a man with a head held in his hands with words on his arms like loony bin, your head, get over it, and others. And then below the head held in hands are large letters, crazy, schizo, lock 'em up, psycho, and others, all depicting people with mental disorders in a very negative light. Here's another magazine cover, the Time magazine, and this is about attention deficit disorder. This shows a shaky picture of a man with two sets of eyes, noses, mouths above each other as if in agitation. The words on the cover say disorganized, distracted, discombobulated. Doctors say you may have, in large letters, attention deficit disorder. It's not just kids who suffer from it. The use of the word suffer also indicates a negative response. Now, humans make judgments all the time about things that we see. It's just our natural inclination. And, we like something, we dislike something. And we're not even really sometimes aware of why we have these feelings. So we can see things as valued polarities of images, either positive and or negative. So some valued ways of looking at things is like being wealth and prosperity. The other side of the coin would be poverty. Or we can look at the value side of youth and newness. Or the polarity would be oldness, illness, and death. Or we look at the value side of being competent and the devalued side of being incompetent. Valued independence, devalued dependent. We can be productive or we can be lazy. We can have an unrestrained choice or a little choice. So you just see these polarities that exist all the time. So I want to just show you how images can show positive sort of perceptions. Here we have a bright yellow sunrise with beams of light emanating from the sun, rising over a green field. We see this, we feel good. It's a new day is upon us, and it's bright and sunny. So just that image can give us a feeling, an emotional feeling, and how we see something, the image of it. Here we have new life again. Here we see 5 white eggs on straw with a chick bursting out of one egg, and a chick standing by an egg. And this represents new life, the beginning scene and the hatching of 2 cute little yellow chicks. Again, a very positive, upbeat sort of image. Here we see 8 healthy-looking runners, all in a line abreast of one another, wearing race numbers on their chests in a starting position for a race. The mixed group of men and women, white and black, they show vitality, strength, and the start of action, all positive images. So just by looking at this image, you get a sense of strength and vitality. Here we have 2 pictures. One picture shows 3 women, nicely dressed, smiling, and they're looking at one of the women's iPads. And you can just see by how they're together that they're enjoying one another's company. It's happy, it's harmonious. And then we have another image that shows 2 women side by side, and one of the women is a young woman with Down syndrome. Darcy's daughter, actually, Mary, that she talked about earlier, and she's with another friend, and you can just see by their body positions, by their smiling, that it's a positive image of representing happiness and being harmonious. Now, images are so powerful that we even have emojis on our phones. So we don't have to use words. We can just show a picture, and that gets across what we're trying to say to someone. We all know that this means love and happiness. I mean, that's, again, how powerful images can be. We all know that this is a stop sign. But if it didn't have the word stop on it, we still might stop just because of the red color and the shape of the sign, that's how powerful these images become to us. And even in death, there may be images. At a funeral, we expect to see a coffin, an urn, flowers, prayer cards. Okay? At a cemetery, we may see monuments with religious figures or symbols of them as spiritual signs. So again, when we see this image, we think of death and burial. So again, images are powerful. So it bears repeating, images are powerful. They carry lots of meaning in them and communicate positive and negative impressions, as I've shown you. Images, whether positive, negative, or neutral, are used all the time in human communication. So we've come to realize there are negative images and even stereotypes of people with disabilities. Repetition of images, adults with disabilities on a yellow school bus, teenage students with disabilities in a classroom coloring in a childish coloring book, students with disabilities in a transition classroom being called children, kids, referred to as SPEDs, special education kids. Newspapers, school papers, documents continue the negative repetition. So it's no surprise, to me at least, that many of the media stereotypes about disability become widely recognizable because you see them over and over and over again, and you might not even be conscious of it. Now, as I've said, imagery on people with disabilities can be positive or negative, even neutral, and we know stereotypes, what Darcy spoke about is the valued roles that we've talked a little bit about. These are ever so present in the lives of people with disabilities, and we see these in photos and graphics, in storylines, in movies. We can even hear the words around lifelong child, pity and charity, burden, trivial, lifelong client. These are all very negative images for people with disabilities. So we know that images are so powerful that people use them in all sorts of avenues of their life, and politicians use them all the time. So in politics, candidates are keenly aware of how the images depict themselves. So here from our recent presidential campaign, we have both parties. But look at some of the similarities around imagery here. Biden has his tie on. He's dressed in a blue suit. Harris has a necklace on. They're both wearing COVID-protecting black masks. And that images them as a team fighting COVID with an American flag behind them. And you think it's by accident that the American flag is behind them? Certainly not. It's a way to represent patriotism, being an American. And then we also see Trump and Pence, their team, nicely dressed in the same color suits with similar ties, again with the American flag behind them. It's not an accident both teams dress so nicely, use flag imagery to promote their campaign. So no matter what side you're on, what political beliefs you have, we know that imagery is used very deliberately in campaigns for people running for office. So images become so powerful and used so often, we come to know what they mean just by the image, not even saying any words. So here's a silver apple with a bite out of it. And we all know this represents the Apple company. When companies try to sell a product, they pay advertisers large sums of money to display the product in the most favorable way possible, even if it's a lousy product, okay? They show it in its best image. So here is the new iMac with the phrase performance and design taken to the edge. A very sleek and thin iMac is shown with a colorful picture of a flower iMac screen. And this lures you in to want to buy the product. That's how imagery is being used here. Here's another logo that we see quite often. The Nike company, having their rectangular box with the "Just Do It" in it with the check mark. And that's become, their trademark. And people literally buy products because they see that check mark. It's so powerful. Now, if you've got kids, you know what this means, because they can't even read sometimes, but they see the golden arches on the red square, and they're begging you to take them to get fries or a hamburger or whatever. So we know that no words necessary here. That sign is enough to know that it's a McDonald's and a place to go get food. So again, images are very powerful. We buy products because of them. We know they can be positive, negative. They can be very conscious or unconscious. And they're used by companies, politicians, and others to share a message they desire to get across to us. Now let's talk a bit about the phenomenon of image transfer. So growing up, my parents told me to be aware of when I saw a skull and crossbones on any product, because we knew it represented poison. Do not touch that. Do not drink that. So we've come to see a skull and crossbones as representing poison, or if you come from Pittsburgh, the Pirates, because that's sort of the logo they have. And so such signs make me very aware that there might be a danger. And you teach your kids around this as well. So when we talk about this idea of transfer, here's a glass of water, which You see that, oh, yeah, I'll drink that. It's a glass of water. But a simple change by putting that skull and crossbones on, transferring that image to that water, now makes it undrinkable. Just because now we know it might be poison. It might not be water. There might be something wrong with it. So again, you see the power of images and the phenomenon of image transfer. When you move one image onto something else, the impact that can have, either positively or negatively, in this situation, negative. Now, if we want to assist college students with disabilities to make a positive impression, then we need to assist people to be associated with images that convey positive impressions and not negative ones. We want students with disabilities all to have impressions of ability, strength, competence, value, contribution, approachability, friendliness. These are all very positive aspects we want to convey. As I said before, images are powerful. We know images can transfer from one person or thing to another, and images can affect both our conscious and unconscious thinking. Some images we see clearly, like the logo shown earlier. We are aware of what they're trying to convey about a product. However, we are not always conscious of images around us or how they are transferred. Because they are displayed so often, we do not consciously know the impact they may have on us or the person thing being imaged. We are oblivious to the meanings and the messaging, even though it impacts our thinking and even actions. It's like an iceberg. What we see above the water is only a part of the entire iceberg, which is hidden below the surface of the water. So an example for me early in my career working in special education is that even before I saw the teenagers I was to work with, this is what I heard. They were emotionally disturbed and challenging. So I haven't met the students yet, but that's what I'm hearing, okay? The classroom they were taught in appeared as if it was for grade schoolers. Again, I hadn't seen the students, but the classrooms, the image was for younger students, not teenagers. The materials I was used to teach, again, were not what typical teenagers would be using for classroom materials. These were not positive images. So when I actually see the students, I have impressions already in my mind, sort of preconceived notions about the students even before I had a chance to see them. And again, that's the power of images, whether they're visual, oral, okay? They lead you to having impressions about people, like the iceberg example that I gave. As I shared in my story, images can be attached to people through various channels. And here are the 6 channels through which images get attached to people. It can be the physical setting, actually, where people spend time, both exterior and interior. It can be how people look, their personal presentation. It can have to do with their associations and their grouping, who they spend time with. The language we use, the logos that we use can be other ways that we image people. What people do, activities, their use of the time, the rhythms of the day, of the week, of the month, of the year can all impact how people are imaged. And there's other miscellaneous media and ways as well. And I'll share some examples now about these 6 channels through which people are imaged. So here we have a single-family, one-story home with a roofed front porch and sidewalk leading to the front door, but it needs some care. Fresh paint job in the exterior of the home, some new landscaping, a new roof would greatly improve the appearance of the exterior of this building. Okay? So again, when you look at physical setting, the outside of a setting can have an image. Okay? We look at the next image, and this is again another single-family home, but it's nicely landscaped. There's purple flowers on the landscape in front of it. It's got a nice roof. It's nicely colored. It's a whole different image. And if you've ever gone house hunting, you know that first impressions are crucial when you want to purchase a home. So which of these homes would you want to purchase? Again, that's the power of images. We can even look at physical settings internally, the inside of a setting. So here, one of the images shows a storage closet that's being used as a classroom. You've got a small table with sort of uncomfortable chairs. You've got sort of an easel. It doesn't look like a typical classroom, so there's an image to it. And if you contrast it, again, juxtapose it to the image next to it, this is at Wake Forest University, and it's high-tech. It's got the nice tables and the carpeted floor, and it's got the wall-mounted boards with a logo on it. If you had to choose which classroom you wanted to receive a class in, my sense is you'd want to be at the Wake Forest classroom. The second channel I want to talk about is personal presentation, which is personal appearance, how one dresses, how one looks. And no two people look exactly alike, particularly on a college campus or a university campus. And we know there's a wide range of dress and appearances. Nevertheless, students with disabilities need to dress and look as you'd expect other matriculated students to dress and appear. And here we have two pictures of students with disabilities dressed and appearing attractive. We hear how clothes make the man or woman. Well, they do. So when you go for a job interview, or you're trying to do an internship or whatever, you know that how you dress can have a big impact how you make an impression on the people who interview you. Now, a third channel has to do with who you hang out with, who you spend time with, and any groupings that the person's involved in. My mom used to say, "You're known by the company you keep," and she wanted me to be with respected groups and groups that were valued, and certainly not the groups that were getting in trouble or who dressed in certain ways. And this equally applies to students with disabilities as to who do they spend their time with. So here we have an image of students with disabilities in an outdoor setting, but they're all hanging out together. There's no other students without disabilities. So they're associated just with other students with disabilities. Okay? Versus the other image shows four students around the table at a university cafeteria type area, just hanging out. And there's one student with a disability and three without. Again, the image of associations and groupings can be quite powerful. Now, one of the highlights of going to college and university is graduation. And if you only graduate with other students with disability, then this becomes a special graduation in a special setting. And it's not like what other students who are matriculated would go through. So here we have an image of a special graduation only for students with disabilities who attend a new story schools in Indiana, PA, to provide educational behavior services to students with disabilities in grades K to 12 in around Indiana and Armstrong, Westmoreland, and the surrounding county. And then we have another image of the Millersville University graduation, which is for all students, even students with disabilities, promenading together for the graduation. The image here is that you belong, that you're part of the entire college. You're not separate, you're not special, you're not different. So again, groupings and associations can have a lot to do with how you're imaged. Now, the fourth channel is that of language, including logos. Now, we know that people with disabilities have been labeled and stereotyped forever. And we know that words like retard, moron, idiot, downs, epileptic are hurtful and image people in negative ways. There's even been a campaign by people with disabilities to remove the R, in quotes, retard word. It's not welcomed here. It hurts, okay? So we know that our initiatives in higher education need to avoid verbal and written words that image students with disabilities as disabled, as being a medical condition, the autistic, the wheelchair student, the cerebral palsy student. We also, we want to make sure we talk about students with disabilities not as children, because they're students, okay? They're young adults, men and women in college. They're entering the academic and the adult world. Words such as kids, youngsters, teenagers, they image students with disabilities as younger as they are and should be avoided. Equally, patting students in the head, speaking in a sing-song language, thinking of them by their mental age, these are all negatively imaged students. To become an adult, it's important to be treated and talked about as such. Another language trap is thinking, talking, and writing about students in inspirational ways. Using words like amazing, overcoming, persevering, exceeding expectations. Never in my life would I have expected. We mean well by this, but again, the image is that these are exceptional people. They're not like us. And people with disabilities want to just be treated with respect and dignity and provided an opportunity and talked about like any other non-disabled matriculating student. So the point here is don't change the rules. Treat students with disabilities as you would treat any other matriculated student. In the language you use, the course titles you develop, the names of the initiatives you create, and any logos you develop and use. Now, the fifth channel is about activities use of times and rhythms. And we say time and rhythms, we're talking about days of the week, the month, the year, what sort of takes place in a typical course of the year. And what students with disabilities do as far as any college, university activity on or off campus should be what is expected for students without disabilities. So here in this image is a student with a disability at Lehigh Carbon Community College, and he's presenting in front of a class like any other student would be doing. The image is that of competence and skill. And here is a student in a university class with other students, just attending class with all the other students. Now, as I mentioned earlier, graduation is part of college and university experience, so this is an expected activity for all students. However, how this activity occurs is an issue, as this shows a transition program graduation with the student dressed for the occasion, yet in a special room and only with other students with disabilities, contrasted to a student graduating at Millersville University, right on stage with everybody else. So again, just showing the activities that students with disabilities are involved in university and college should be the same activities as other matriculating students. Another example of activities and use of time and rhythms is students attending a demonstration or going out with friends who are not disabled. And again, this is Darcy Miller's daughter, and she's just going out with a bunch of other college friends like any other college student would do. Now, other parts of school life might be an acting class, and this is at Westchester, including a student with a disability just as part of the class, or going off rock climbing with other students. Again, these are just activities that occur at college, but they're occurring amongst other students who don't have disabilities. Here are examples of an internship at Temple University in the athletic recreational area. And here's another image of just going to a culture event on campus with friends. So for students with disabilities, their on-campus and off-campus activities should mirror that of non-disabled students. They should be expected and have the same class days and hours of other students, the same rhythms of the day, week, and year, including exams, internships, attending events, holidays, vacations, and graduation. Now, the sixth and final channel is that of miscellaneous, and this includes all publicity in all its forms, whether it's social media, YouTube, relationships with journalists or reporters, papers, whether that's articles, letters to the editor, op-ed pieces, television, video, radio, the arts, plays, skits, others. All this media should represent students with disabilities in a positive and valued way. Now, for the 6 channels through which images get attached to people, remember the third presentation by Darcy on the culturally valued analog, what we've called the CVA. For all 6 channels, do what you would do for other students who are matriculating students. It's a very simple concept. Just do what you would do for other students. And don't think about students with disabilities as being different or special, but think of them first and foremost as university students. And we will talk more in other modules about accommodations and supports which might be required for a student with a disability. But however, the image of a student with a disability should be equal to that of any other matriculating student. So here's some actions to take for skillful use of imagery. First, remember that images matter. Okay? They're very powerful and they convey images about the people you serve. Second, practice observing images, what messages they convey about people. Look for images that convey negative and positive impressions. And obviously, we're trying to really promote and support positive images. Third, think carefully about the images that surround the people you support in all the channels. Fourth, learn to analyze images. Some easy questions to use to analyze an image. What message does the image communicate to others about the people you support? For example, their status, their relationship to other students, their personal identity. Does the image reinforce any of the stereotypical ideas about vulnerable people? For example, that they're childish, they're dangerous, they're burdened, they're incapable. Does the image counteract any stereotypical ideas? What positive impression does it convey? And fifth, strive to assist people you support to have positive images around them in whatever way you can. So thank you very much.